Morning, everybody. Oh, there we go, that's magic. Yes, I'm Louise Downing, and I'm based at Arts and Business Scotland, which is a charity that brings together the cultural sector with the private sector in order to foster relationships for the benefit of creativity and culture across Scotland. We provide training and support in governance and in fundraising for not-for-profits, arts and heritage organisations. We also have a grants programme, which I'll talk about a bit later on, which is match funding for business sponsorship of the arts, heritage and culture. And we recognise partnerships, successful partnerships between the arts and business with our annual awards scheme. So I'm the project manager for Resourcing Scotland's Heritage, which is a fundraising training programme specific to the heritage sector. And I'm aware that many of you here today aren't working in culture, but the principles and practices that we're going to talk about in terms of fundraising could be applied to any sector. So hopefully you'll find it of use. For some of you, it'll be a refresher, I think, because you're quite experienced fundraisers. And for others, hopefully it will give you some new ideas as well. So I'm just going to start by looking at the bigger picture, the sort of fundraising landscape, and these stats and figures are taken from a survey that's actually no longer produced at the moment. We are looking to reignite it and start it again. It's called Private Investments in Culture, and the last time that the members of Arts and Business Scotland were involved in this survey was the 2010-11 financial year. So that's when these stats are from, but it just gives us an idea about sources of money and where it's going to. So we'll look first at the sources. So we can see from this that the biggest pot there, just over half of the money coming into culture across the UK, was coming from national and local governments. Earned income, the next biggest pot there, followed by private investment at about 12%. Now, obviously, it's already been mentioned, we know that money from local and national government has been decreasing and will continue to decrease. So this picture has changed, and we know that earned income and private investment has been increasing. So what do we mean by private investments? We break this down into three areas. So the biggest piece of our pie there is individual giving, which includes things like legacies, donations, major gifts from individuals, friends and membership as well. We have money from charitable trusts and foundations. So this is specific to private charitable trusts and foundations. So includes things like family trusts, foundations that maybe businesses have set up as a way to give. And then we have business investment as well, which includes sponsorship, donations, and membership of businesses as well in your organisations. In terms of how this is distributed across the UK, Scotland actually does really well in terms of attracting private investment. So this is specifically that 12% of the private investment that we're looking at. Obviously, London there getting the most, which is probably not surprising, but Scotland's just under 7%. So when you compare to other areas within the United Kingdom, Scotland does do really well. And that equates to about £47 million in private investment coming into the cultural sector in Scotland on an annual basis. This report also breaks it down by art form. So we can see festival in there, which I guess is the closest to events and festivals. 3.6% coming into festivals. This is probably not very clear to see, but we're going to zoom in a moment. So we can get an idea of the money that's coming from trusts and foundations, individuals and businesses into the particular cultural activity that we're looking at. So if we just zoom in on festivals, the majority of money there coming from trusts and foundations. Business investment is pretty decent amounts, but the smallest bit there is individual giving. So when you think about our biggest piece of the pie at the start was individual giving, and yet in terms of festivals, it's a relatively small amount, then maybe there's some opportunities there for events and festivals to think about individual giving, which I know is going to be spoken about later on as well. And maybe, is there an over-reliance on trusts and foundations? Is that the area that we feel most comfortable in? There are challenges with money from trusts and foundations in that, on the whole, although we have just heard an excellent example of a trust that gives money for unrestricted funds, on the whole it is restricted money. So you have to spend it on the particular activity that you said you would. You can't necessarily use it for your sort of operational, ongoing core costs. Where is the money? That's a good question, isn't it? So we're just going to take a look at some ratios, really. And this is about thinking about your fundraising strategy and where you might focus your efforts in terms of return on investment. So for every £1 you spend on your fundraising, what are you likely to receive in return? These are general figures for, across the sort of cultural sector. It may be slightly different for your organisation, and there's lots of different reasons for doing different types of fundraising, which we'll touch on as well. But in terms of the best return on investment, legacy fundraising is right up there. So for every £1 you spend on a legacy fundraising campaign, you're likely to get £27 in return. Now you might think, well, that's not particularly suitable for my organisation. We run events, it's an annual event. Legacy fundraising, you're in it for the long run. It's a long-term type of fundraising. You can put some time and effort into starting a legacy campaign if you don't already have one, but you might not see a return on that investment for 5-10 years. It depends. But it is something that you can start quite easily, and you can reap the rewards in years to come. And again, unrestricted income. Charitable trusts. The reason we spend so much time completing applications and writing proposals is the return on investment. So for every £1 spent, you like to get £9.60 in return for a charitable trust. As I've already mentioned, there are challenges with charitable trusts. Quite often the money will be restricted. You have to be very organised if you're applying to trusts because of the sort of lead-in time for many of them. But on the whole, can be a good source of money, particularly for projects and events. Individual giving. So particularly talking here about major donors, so a transformational amount of money provided to your organisation, and we're also looking at membership as well. A good return on investment for every £1 spent, you like to get £5 in return. It's slightly lower than some of the other sources of funding that we're talking about, simply because of the relationship building that's involved with individual giving. So you need to be able to invest time in those relationships in order to attract individuals to give to your cause. Corporate giving, again, slightly lower. For every £1 spent, you like to get £4.30 in return. Again, I think it is about that relationship building and the time it takes to bring on a corporate and then steward them, maintain that relationship as well. Right at the bottom of our table here, we've got fundraising events and community fundraising, which tend to have the lowest return on investment. But there are other reasons for having fundraising events and for doing community fundraising, particularly if you're a community-based organisation. You may want to attract new volunteers, you may want to engage and involve your community in the work that you do. So these can be an excellent way to do that, as well as raise some money at the same time. Okay, so we're talking about the principles of fundraising today. So I'm going to take you through a case for support and how you might develop a case for support. Identifying potential donors, funders, and sources of funding. How you're going to research those prospects, because we're talking about prospects and not suspects. Planning for your fundraising, an important step to have some sort of strategy or plan. Involve, how you're going to involve those supporters, get them engaged in the work that you do. How you might ask for money. Always say thank you. And maintaining the relationship, how you're going to steward those donors, keep them on board, keep them engaged. So we'll start by looking at case for support. What is a case for support? So I've got a definition here: a clear, concise, compelling and inspirational pitch. Your case for support is the basis for all fundraising. Once you have a case for support, you can apply it to all different types of fundraising, whether that's writing proposals, developing fundraising applications, information on your website, speaking to individuals, going to see businesses, etc. And you want to get across the reasons why your organisation merits support. Why should the donor be interested in you? Why should they want to give to your event? I've been through this process with a couple of different organisations now, and what works really well is if you start with an internal case for support. So that might be a slightly longer document than you would show to the public, but you can bring together all the information that you need to make your case, and then from that you can build marketing materials, external content that's going to go out to potential donors and supporters. So a case for support in its simplest form should get across who you are and why you matter, what you do, your direction of travel, where you're headed, and how others see you. And as I've already mentioned, it's the basis for all of your fundraising and should answer the question, why should I be interested as a donor, as a supporter? You then use the information for proposals, have the same information on your websites. It's about key messages, about consistent messages as well. And then if you produce any sort of marketing materials, any brochures, leaflets about a particular legacy campaign, about your membership opportunities, about specific projects, you can use all the same information. I've got an example that I've stolen from the Bristol Family Arts Festival, which if you go onto their website, you can download their case for support. And it is just 2 sides of A4. And I just particularly like this one, so I stole it. I'm not expecting you to be able to read this, but it's just to give you an idea. You can have a look at it on the website. But they very clearly get across who they are, why they exist. They get across their impact. They use some quotes from participants in the festival. And that's that whole thing about how others see you. So they get that across really clearly, and how the donor can get involved. They're particularly targeting businesses, I would say, with this, although they could also attract individuals. And I'd just like to point out that the 2 contacts they have, one is the learning manager and one is the learning and participation manager. They're not the fundraisers. They probably don't have fundraisers. And I'm aware that a lot of organisations are in that position where, you know, many of you will wear many hats, and your main job might not be the fundraising, it might just be part of what you do. So the importance of having a case for support and having a plan is even more important when you don't have a team or a particular person leading on the fundraising in that way. So identify is the first step in our fundraising process. So we've got our case for support, so we want to try to identify potential donors and supporters. So the best advice I can give you is to start with those that are closest to you, which for many of you will be your board of trustees, hopefully. Could be your staff, could be your volunteers. Who do they know? Are they able to give in their own right? Do they have an address book that they can open up and give you contacts for? Do they own businesses? Do they know other people that own businesses that might be interested in supporting you in some way? So if you can start with those that are closest to you, you're more likely to get a result. It's about thinking about who you've already got a relationship with as well. Those that have already given to you are more likely to give again in the future. If you don't have any existing relationships with businesses or individuals or trusts, think about who you have a connection with. So it could be that you look at your suppliers, for example. Is there something that they could be giving you in kind? Would they be interested in sponsoring you? So you're looking for that connection to what you do. There's 3 C's you're looking for. There's connection to you, there's concern for your cause and the work that you're doing, and there's the capacity to give. And that's the information that you need to find out more about when you're doing your research. Research depends on what sort of fundraising you're looking to do. Hopefully you're looking to do a variety of different types of fundraising. If you're looking at charitable trusts, for example, you may be looking at online resources, print resources, trying to find out the criteria for the trust, trying to speak to somebody at the trust if you can. See if any of your trustees know the trustees of the charitable trust that you're applying to, so they can have a conversation with them first, or at least tell them that this application is on its way. These are all things that can help your application to be successful. So find out the criteria, find out who they've supported before, and see if they're similar to you in the work that you do. If you're looking at individual giving, and in particular, if you're looking at high net worth individuals, so those individuals that could give you a major gift, think about your existing database. How much do you know about the people that are on your database? Can you find out more? Can you survey them? Or can you use an external company? If you've got a large database, could you use an external company to survey them and try and find out more about these people? Do any of them have the capacity to give? They obviously have an interest in you because they're on your database already. They've got that connection. Hopefully they've got that concern for your cause. So you're trying to find out the capacity to give as well. And in terms of corporates, it's a good idea again to start with businesses' websites. What are they interested in? What are their values? Do they have a history of giving? What else have they given to in the past? Could they be a good fit, a good match for you? Okay, planning. So as I mentioned before, it's a very good idea to have a plan. And part of the plan is thinking about who is actually doing the fundraising. So there's lots of different models for this, and it depends on your organisation and how you're set up. You might have the fundraising being led by the board with support from the staff and or volunteers. You might have staff leading on the fundraising, but with other support, hopefully from the board and from volunteers. If you're lucky, you might have a fundraiser or a fundraising team. And another way is to outsource the fundraising. But what I would say is the ideal situation is for everyone to be involved in the fundraising in some way in your organisation, but it does require leadership and coordination, and that's why you need to have a plan. So our next step is about involving those prospects that you've identified, you've researched, how you're going to engage them in the work that you do. And you'll all be in a fantastic position because you run events and festivals. So that's an opportunity to get people to come in and see and experience the work that you do and engage them that way. A lot of people enjoy experiences that money cannot normally buy, behind the scenes type opportunities. So that might be a way that you can engage people to come along, find out more about you, and you can tell them how they can help as well at the same time. If you're thinking about fundraising at other times of the year, building up relationships, then use your newsletters, use reports, use annual reviews to get your case for support across, to get the message out there. Let's stop now. Hopefully. I was going to ask you a question now because I've been talking too much. So why do people give? Why do people give to charity? Why do they give to good causes? Why do you give to the causes or the charities that you do? Anybody have any thoughts about why people give? Just shout them out at me.
Personal interest.
Personal interest, absolutely.
Raise their profile.
To raise their profile, yeah.
Because you care.
Because you care, definitely.
To feel involved.
To feel involved, yeah.
Offset tax.
Oh, cynical. Possibly.
Brand association.
Brand association, yeah, especially for businesses, absolutely. Anything else? Why do you give? Does anyone give to charity here? Yeah. Why do you give to the charities you give to?
Believe in what they're doing.
You believe in what they're doing? Yep.
I think they're making a difference.
You think they're making a difference and you want to be part of that? Excellent.
Guilt.
Guilt, that's a major factor. That's the only reason I give money. No, yes, absolutely. Anything else? Yeah.
I do it because I enjoy learning, and it's a great way to learn from others,
Yeah.
especially the young generation growing up.
Yeah.
And it's free because it's my money I'm giving.
Excellent. Okay, we're not going to get there, are we? There's the first thing that's going to come up on the screen now. One of the main reasons that people give to causes is because they were asked. So, it's, you know, if you don't ask, you don't get. We've already mentioned because they care about the cause. And one final thing that I've sort of touched on already, because they can afford it. So they are the three sort of, obviously all the other things that we've mentioned are all factors as well, but the three main reasons why people give is because they were asked, because they care, and because they can afford it. Okay, so some essentials if you're asking for money. The best way to ask for money is face-to-face, if you can. Obviously that's not always possible, particularly if you're talking about fundraising from charitable trusts and foundations. It's not always possible to get a face-to-face meeting. It is always a good idea to try and speak to somebody at the trust if you can. Obviously some of them are quite closed, but if you can, try to do that just so that they're more aware of you. If you are asking face-to-face, then be prepared and always focus on the work of the organisation, the work that you do. People give to people. So it's a conversation that you're having with this person face to face. They might not say what you think they're going to say, so you need to listen and respond to what they're telling you. And I think people are also interested in the impact of the work that you do, on the impact that you have on your communities that you're working in, and the wider impact as well. So keep that in mind when you're speaking to people about providing funding or donation. Always think from the donor's point of view, so put yourself in their shoes. Why should they want to give? Why should they be interested? Don't go off on a tangent about how wonderful a particular aspect of your event is. And you should be proud to ask. I think a lot of people find asking the most difficult part of fundraising, especially that face-to-face ask. It's a good idea to try and make sure you've got the right people in the room. So if you have a particularly enigmatic chair, for example, they might be a good person to be asking, or they might be the totally wrong person to ask. It just depends. But you should be proud. You shouldn't be ashamed to ask. You know, you're doing the right thing. You're asking them to do the right thing. You're asking them to get involved in the work that you do and to support it. So if they say no, it's not very nice, but it's fine. You can move on to the next thing. Thank you. Thank you. No. Yeah. The difference between thank you and acknowledgement. So you always want to say thank you for any donation, any funding that you receive from anywhere. You want to say thank you. And that's different from acknowledgement because not all funders and donors wish to be publicly acknowledged for their support. So you need to know about the wishes of the funder, or of the donor. You know, some want their name in lights and others wish to remain anonymous. So make sure you know what they want so that you can act on their wishes. I've just said that. If you're sending thank you letters, think about who signs the letter. Some charities I know have policies on this. You know, if the donation is a certain amount of money, it'd be signed by the fundraiser. If it's a bit more, if the chief exec, if it's more again, it'll be the chair of the charity. So think about where the letter's coming from and what it says, etc. You don't always have to send a letter, but it depends on what you want to do. And thank you and acknowledgement are ways that you can help the donor to remember you. So I think maybe for some trusts and foundations it might be quite unusual for them to get a thank you letter. It shouldn't be, but it might be. So they're more likely to remember you if you've sent a nice thank you or a certificate or something like that. how will they remember you? They're more likely to give again if they remember you. And our final sort of step is about stewardship. So this is about maintaining those relationships. As I mentioned, the people that are most likely to give to you are those that have given previously. So you want to try and maintain your relationships with your supporters. So that involves looking after your current donors, funders and supporters, keeping people engaged. One way that you can do that is maybe through your annual report or review and turn that into almost like a marketing document that you can send out to people. You can thank people within that document. You can show them the impact of the work that you've done, you know, the difference that their money has made. Always report back to your donors and funders about the difference that their money has made. It's more likely to keep them on board. One thing just to be aware of is you don't want to be spending more money on stewardship and thank you and acknowledgement than you are bringing in terms of your fundraising. So just be careful with that. I have heard some stories, which I'm sure many of you have as well, about champagne and caviar, and then people realising, oh, we spent all the money on the champagne and the caviar. So yeah, just a warning about that. So I said I'd tell you a bit about the new Arts Sponsorship Grant. So this is the grants programme that Arts and Business Scotland manages. And it's a match funding programme. So it matches business sponsorship of the arts, heritage and culture, pound for pound. The sponsor has to be new to the sector, so they need to have not sponsored the arts before or not sponsored the arts within the last 3 years. So trying to entice them back into the sector. I think one of the fantastic things is that it supports both in-kind and cash sponsorship. So if you have an in-kind sponsorship agreement with a business, you can apply to Arts and Business Scotland and we can match it with money, pound for pound. So the maximum grant is £40,000 and the minimum is £1,000, and it's a rolling programme, so you can apply at any time. And I've got a couple of examples just to talk about. So this one's from last year. The Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society was sponsored by Serco. Serco had just taken over the Caledonian sleeper service, and the Fringe Society very much recognised that this was a good fit for them because a lot of people travel from London to Edinburgh for the festivals in August. And some of the performers received free travel, and in return they performed on the train. So they did a 20 or 30 minute performance. I think that's one happening right there. Serco were delighted with this relationship because it allowed them to align their brand with a well-established brand, internationally known, the Fringe Festival. So a really good partnership, which was matched pound for pound with the new Arts Sponsorship Grant Scheme. It included in-kind and cash sponsorship, that one. Another example is the Retina Festival, which is a photography festival. They were sponsored by Sterling Solutions, which is a creative agency. They do design and print, etc. This was an in-kind sponsorship, again matched with the new Arts Sponsorship Grant Scheme. And this was very much built on a personal relationship. There was a personal contact with the business, but it was good timing because Sterling Solutions had just opened up a Edinburgh office. So they were trying to raise their profile in the city. And one of the benefits that they received from the sponsorship was that they got to host an event as part of the festival. So they brought in, I think it was about 40 existing and potential clients, and they did get new clients as a result of hosting that event. So these are the types of benefits that businesses are interested in if they can work with you to use your events and festivals in such a way. So just briefly, as I mentioned, Arts and Business Scotland provides training in governance and in fundraising. We've got an event coming up that there's a couple of places left on that you might be interested in the week after next. So that's crowdfunding for arts and heritage organisations. As I mentioned, I'm the project manager for Resourcing Scotland's Heritage. So if you are a heritage group or organisation, or the event or festival that you put on is heritage related, then have a look. We've got a separate website, so have a look at the website there and you can see the events that are coming up. And I'll say thank you again, but this is an actual thank you. Thank you for listening, and that's my contact details. And we've got time for some questions
Yeah, thank you, Louise. That's some really great insights there and practical advice, I think, for all of us to think about our fundraising. With the new grant scheme that you're talking about, is that a rolling programme?
It is, yeah.
And it's open just on an ongoing basis, or is there a kind of...
It is. As long as there's money, it's open. So new money comes in at the financial year, at the start of the financial year, but as a sort of applicant, you can apply at any time.
Great, I think that's a really great opportunity. And there is a programme that...
I was going to mention sports match. There's a sports one as well, but I don't think it's currently open.
Right.
Sports Scotland manage that one.
Okay, yeah, great stuff. Has anyone got any questions for Louise? Any questions? Here we are. Blue top. Thanks, David.
Hello. I'm interested in you are interested in heritage organisations. How wide is your definition of heritage? Does it stretch beyond buildings to that kind of shared cultural history of doing things?
Absolutely, yes. We're funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund to provide the training and capacity building programme. So our definition is basically the same as the Heritage Lottery Fund's definition. So it includes built heritage, natural heritage, intangible and cultural heritage. So it's really wide, very wide.
Any more questions? Anyone else? Okay, well thank you very much, Louise. That was an excellent presentation.